Hey, it's me here. Today we're going to talk about World War II, and specifically how Japan remembers it. This is going to be a little bit different than most videos I make because I want to show you guys what I experienced when I went to Japan. And today, we're going to talk about the way that they remember the soldiers who died during the Second World War. It's going to be interesting. So let's get into it. This is part of a mini-series that I did on Japan. Now, this one is a little bit more serious than some of my normal content. I am a big proponent of remembering our history, and so I thought this would be an excellent opportunity for us to look back at World War II through the eyes of someone visiting Japan. When I was in Japan, I did something crazy. I visited the Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo. If you don't know, this shrine is dedicated to over 2.4 million Japanese war dead, 389 of which are convicted war criminals. The interesting thing about the Yasukuni Shrine is that it does more than just memorialize the war dead. It actually enshrines them as deities. This is a major point of contention with the people who say that Japan doesn't apologize enough for its actions in World War II. However, if you look at the Yasukuni Shrine and understand that Japanese culture does not differentiate between gods and humans in the same way that many Western religions do, you can see why this is done. The shrine is absolutely massive. You enter through a gigantic red torii gate and then walk down a very long pathway until you reach the main shrine itself. On both sides of the path are hundreds of smaller shrines that hold the names of individual soldiers who died in combat. As you walk along this path, there are also large statues of samurai warriors and tigers. These statues were donated by families of the soldiers who died in combat. They hoped that these statues would bring their family members home safely, and those who didn't return became the spirits that now dwell within them. At the end of the path is a large pond with a bridge over it. There are cherry trees all around the pond, so in the spring it must be absolutely beautiful. Across the pond from the main shrine is another large torii gate. You walk through this one and then up a set of stairs to reach the main shrine itself. There are two enormous stone dogs guarding the stairs. These are called komenyu and are meant to ward off evil spirits. Once you reach the top of the stairs, you walk through the final torii gate before reaching the main shrine. This one is covered with thousands of paper strips called ima. These strips have prayers written on them and are meant to be a way of communicating with the gods. Once you pass through the final torii gate, you will see the main shrine with two smaller ones to either side of it. The central shrine is dedicated to the Emperor Emu. It is believed that he was the first emperor of Japan. The two flanking shrines are dedicated to Inari and Hachiman. Inari is the god of fertility and industry, while Hachiman is the god of war. This is interesting to me, because obviously, you are dedicating a shrine to the god of war in a place that is dedicated to the memory of those who died in conflict. There are two attendants who stand outside the shrine and keep it clean and orderly. They are dressed in traditional Japanese clothing, and their job is to maintain the sanctity of the shrine. It is forbidden to take pictures inside the inner sanctum, so I won't show you any. But there are three things that I noticed while standing there. First, the size of the shrine is actually quite small. This is in stark contrast to the huge complex that surrounds it. It made me wonder if the real power of the shrine comes from the stories that are told about it, rather than the shrine itself. Second, there were no images or statues within the shrine. All that was there was a box in front of the altar. I was told that this is where the tablets with the names of the war dead are kept. Finally, there was a low hum coming from inside the shrine. It wasn't loud, but it was constant. It was almost like the spirits of the dead were whispering to each other. Of course, that might have been my imagination, but it was still a powerful feeling nonetheless. Walking around the grounds of the Yasukuni Shrine, I saw all sorts of artifacts from the war. There were tanks, planes, guns, even a 15 centimeters cannon that was recovered from Okinawa. This is pretty interesting considering that the Battle of Okinawa is one of the most controversial events in Japanese history. The battle took place in 1945 and resulted in the deaths of nearly 200,000 Japanese soldiers and civilians. Many of the survivors believed that the shrine was cursed and refused to return home after the war. Even today, there are people who believe that the spirits of the dead are trapped in Okinawa because of the curse. I couldn't help but wonder what the soldiers who died in Okinawa would think of the shrine. Some of them might see it as a place of honor and remember it fondly, while others might despise it for what it represents. Unfortunately, we can't ask them because none of them are still alive. One of the most interesting things I learned about the Japanese war dead is that they were often seen as heroes. This is especially true of the soldiers who died in places like China and Southeast Asia. They were seen as victims of Western imperialism, and their deaths were used to rally the Japanese people against their foreign oppressors. This is reflected in the many statues and monuments that were erected in their honor. While I was in Japan, I visited a small museum dedicated to the 100th Independent Heavy Artillery Battalion. This unit was formed in 1937 and fought in the early stages of the war. They were involved in the battles of Shanghai, Nanjing, and Wuhan. The museum is small, but it contains a lot of personal items from the soldiers who died there, such as their helmets, rifles, and diaries. I found this stuff very interesting because it gave me a personal glimpse into the lives of these men. These weren't just faceless soldiers who died in combat. They were real people with real emotions and experiences. One of the diaries belonged to a young soldier named Hiroshi. He wrote about his experiences fighting in China and his longing for home. In one entry, he wrote about how he had been separated from his unit and was hiding in a cave for days without food or water. He was scared and alone, but he knew that he had to keep going. Eventually, he was found by a Chinese farmer who led him out of the mountains and back to his unit. Hiroshi survived the war and lived to be an old man. But when I read his diary, I couldn't help but feel for him. He was just a kid when he went to war, and he saw things that no one should ever have to see. Overall, I found the Japanese to be extremely respectful of their war dead. They were polite when they talked about them and took care to clean their graves and shrines. This is in stark contrast to the way that Americans often view their veterans. We tend to forget about them once they come home, and many of them end up homeless or without access to health care. I don't know why this is, but I think it has something to do with the fact that America is a much bigger country than Japan. We have a lot of veterans, and it can be hard to keep track of them all, but that's no excuse. Our veterans deserve better, and so do the veterans of every other country. The last thing I want to mention is the issue of Pearl Harbor. When I was in Japan, I met a lot of people who were very proud of what happened at Pearl Harbor. They saw it as a heroic attack that avenged the Japanese who had died at the hands of the Americans. Of course, this is not how the Americans view it. To them, Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack that caught them off guard and resulted in the deaths of over 2,000 people. There's no right or wrong way to view it. It just depends on which side of the Pacific you're on. All in all, I had a very interesting experience when I visited Japan. The people were friendly and welcoming, and I learned a lot about their history and culture. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time.